On this evening, ladies and gentlemen, I'll get right down to it. This is breaking news that I just was privy to find. The Senate Republicans defeated a measure to halt Iran strikes despite growing anxieties. According to The Hill, written by Alexandra Bolton, Senate Republicans voted largely along party lines today to defeat a bipartisan war powers resolution to halt military action against Iran. Even though a number of GOP senators are voicing concerns about the lack of a clear game plan for ending the conflict. The motion to discharge the resolution from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee failed by a vote of 47 to 53. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, who regularly opposes deploying U.S. armed forces in foreign countries, was the only Republican to vote to advance the measure. Two key moderate Republicans, Senator Susan Collins from Maine, who faces a tough reelection, and Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, whose political base includes Democrats and moderates in Alaska, both voted to block the resolution, even as both included notes of caution about the operation. Collins said before the vote that the administration had done a much better job explaining the mission to members of Congress than it did before the overnight assault to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. And in a statement released after the vote, Collins argued that advocating a war powers resolution would undercut the troops. But she also warned that the Trump administration has to keep lawmakers fully briefed on the conflict. Passing this resolution now would send the wrong message to Iran and to our troops. At this juncture, providing unequivocal support to our service members is critically important as it is ongoing consultation by the administration with Congress, she said. Murkowski on Wednesday agreed that the administration did a better job of earning GOP support for the strike against Iran than it did before Congress voted on another resolution to halt military action against Venezuela earlier this year. A U.S. submarine sinks Iranian warships as conflict spreads beyond the Middle East, according to The Guardian. Let's get right down to it. Andrew Roth and Kat Brown, along with Hannah Ellis Peterson, are responsible for this article. A torpedo fired by a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian warship off the south coast of Sri Lanka as the Trump administration followed through on its threats to destroy Tehran's military and political leadership. At least 87 Iranian soldiers were killed in the attack on the Aris Dina on Wednesday. The frigate was sailing in international waters as it returned from a naval exercise organized by India in the Bay of Bengal. The torpedo strike prompted questions from former U.S. officials about whether Washington's aim of eliminating all of Iran's military breached international law. The incident came as the U.S.-Israeli air assault on Iran continued for a fifth day, with Washington officials warning that strikes would soon hit targets deeper in Iran. U.S. forces also targeted pro-Iranian militia in Iraq, while the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps announced that it would continue missile and drone strikes on targets throughout the Middle East. Pete Hegseth, the ex-Fox News host now leading the Pentagon as defense secretary, confirmed that the U.S. sank the Iris Dena as it sailed close to the Sri Lankan coast. The Pentagon released black and white footage of a Mark 48 heavyweight torpedo striking the frigate, sending a geyser of seawater into the air. An American submarine sank an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Hegseth said the attack was carried out late Tuesday night. In other Iranian news, according to the Washington Post, Iranians mourn children and teachers who were killed in the school strike. According to Sunny Westfall for the Washington Post, thousands gathered in the streets of the southern Iranian city of Manab to mourn the victims of an airstrike on an elementary school that killed scores of children and staff members, Iran's mission to the United Nations said. At least 175 people, many of them children, were killed in the attack Saturday on the Shajari Taribech Elementary School for Girls in Manab, Iranian officials said. On Tuesday, mourners wept, held hands over hearts, prayed, then threw hands up in anguish, raised fists, some clenched, printed out photos of young children, some threw petals. Video shared by the Iranian-run Islamic Republic news agency and verified by the Washington Post, shows a succession of people carrying caskets. Some are doing with photos of young children. Saturday is the first day of the Iranian school week. Video recorded in the strike aftermath and confirmed by the Post shows one side of the building in apparent collapse with shattered glass and crumbled walls. Video released by the Iranian media showed colorful children's backpacks stained with blood. U.S. troops who died in the Iran war were remembered as devoted parents and soldiers. First class Nicole Amor was just days away from returning home to her husband and two children when a drone struck at a command center in Kuwait, killed her and 5 other U.S. service members. She was almost home, her husband Joey Amor said from their home in White Bear Lake, Minnesota on Tuesday. You don't go to Kuwait thinking something's going to happen, and for her to be the first. This is a photo here of the couple. This is the young woman who was killed while in action, and a grieving husband is left behind. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, there are going to be many more casualties that are going to be taking place, and many more deaths are going to occur. It is apparent that the Senate confirmed unanimously that they want the war to continue. They're not going to curb the war powers of the president. So she was almost home. Amor was one of 6 U.S. soldiers killed. They died just one day after the U.S. and Israel launched its military campaign against Iran. Iran responded by launching missiles and drones against Israel and several Gulf Arab states that host U.S. armed forces. Those killed included Captain Cody Hort, 35, of Winter Haven, Florida, Sergeant First Class Noah Tigens, 42, of Bellevue, Nebraska, and Sergeant Declan Cody, 20, of West Des Moines, Iowa, who was posthumously promoted from specialist. No other names were released. These men and women all bravely volunteered to defend our country, and their sacrifice will never be forgotten, Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll said. The problem with this is going to be this. We're going into the midterm elections. People are not going to feel like supporting a war. And when you have grieving husbands and wives and mothers and fathers over their children, they are going to remember that that Congress had the power to curb the war powers of the president, and that Congress and the Senate could have stopped this, and they chose not to do it. This is not going to pan out the way that Republicans think they are. You cannot use a war to justify what you're doing in the attempt to gain votes so that you can have this control of the Senate and of the Congress. War is necessary at times, but at this point in time, they're going to remember when November comes around, ladies and gentlemen. No one wants their son or daughters to be used as a sacrifice for political leverage. And that's how they're going to see it. Sadly, there will be likely more before it ends. That's the way it is, President Trump said concerning the deaths. Cody had just told his father last week that he had been recommended for a promotion from specialist to sergeant, a rank he received. He was one of the youngest people in his class, but seemed to impress his instructors. His father, Andrew Cody, said Tuesday he was very good at what he did, he said. Sometimes this stuff is hard to read, ladies and gentlemen. I get no joy out of reading it, but these things have to be read. These articles must be read. And now this is a news alert. Pay attention to this story. ICE confirms a measles outbreak has occurred in the nation's largest detention facility in Texas, according to NBC News. At least 14 cases of measles have been confirmed at the nation's largest ICE detention facility, an agency spokesperson told NBC News in a statement. People who tested positive for the highly contagious disease at Camp East Montana in El Paso, Texas, have been cohorted and separated from the rest of the detained population to prevent further spread, the spokesperson said. The agency is closely monitoring the situation and coordinating with public health authorities to ensure appropriate medical care and containment measures are in place. The health and safety of detainees, staff, and community remain a top priority. Representative Veronica Escobar, a Democrat from Texas whose El Paso district includes the detention center located on the Fort Bliss Army base, said the facility is closed to visitors and attorneys because of the outbreak. In addition to the 14 people who got sick, 112 other individuals have been isolated in connection to the outbreak, according to Escobar. There has been nothing but crisis after crisis inside the walls of this tent city, the Democratic congressman said in a statement. Since Camp East Montana opened last year, 3 detainees have died while in ICE custody. Victor Manuel Diaz, 36, of Nicaragua, died of a presumed suicide inside the facility on January 14. Francisco Gaspar Andes, 48, a detainee from Guatemala, died of health complications from cirrhosis and cardiac hypertrophy. Another Camp East Montana detainee, 55-year-old Geraldo Lunes Campos of Cuba, died on January 3rd, and his death was ruled a homicide. According to ICE, the agency provides comprehensive medical care for detainees, including dental and mental health services, as well as access to medical appointments and 24-hour care. In another story here, according to the Wall Street Journal, a judge has ordered the government to begin refunding more than $130 billion in tariffs. This article is written by Lydia Wheeler, James Finelli, and Louisa Radowski. A federal trade court judge on Wednesday ordered the Trump administration to start refunding the more than $130 billion it collected in the global tariffs invalidated by the Supreme Court last month. Following a hearing involving a flirtation company's fight for a refund, Judge Richard Eaton of the Manhattan-based Court of International Trade issued a written order directing the administration to begin the process of refunding importers. He set a hearing for Friday at which he asked for updates. More than 2,000 lawsuits have been filed by companies, including big names such as Casco, Wholesale, FedEx, and Pandora Jewelry, seeking to recoup their money. The judge's orders requires U.S. Customs and Border Protection to issue refunds by recalculating the initial duties importers paid, excluding the tariffs voided by the High Court. Eaton also said the court's chief judge indicated he will be in charge of settling the refund litigation. Larry Friedman, a partner at Barnes, Richardson, and Colborn, said this means the government has to issue a refund to everyone who paid the tariffs. This is the order I hoped for, but never expected, he said. The administration is expected to appeal the order to prevent it from taking effect immediately. The White House didn't respond to a request for comment. There's something sinister about that right now. According to APnews.com, the House committee votes to subpoena Attorney General Bondi to answer questions over the Epstein files. The House Oversight Committee voted Wednesday to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi to answer questions over the Justice Department's handling of files related to the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking investigation. 5 Republicans joined Democrats to support the subpoena proposed by GOP Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina in a sign of continued frustration with the department's review and release of a trench of documents regarding the disgraced financier. The Justice Department had no immediate comment on the subpoena. And lastly, on this evening, all right, I'll do that one another time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right there for tonight. And there is a lot of stories that I am reviewing, and hopefully on tomorrow in Global News, I'll get a chance to cover them all on an expanded edition of Tyrone Bowman Live. But for now, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your comments, pro and con. Until next time, never surrender, never quit.